Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Sub-Saharan Africa, Macky Sall has returned to Dakar after campaigning throughout the country in what is the final stretch before Sunday's vote. That tweet's from Nicholas Hack, who I met here in Nairobi for Al Jazeera. My article over the weekend was Nigeria Decides 2019. I started by quoting President Cyril Ramaphosa, who was quoting Ben Okri, who said, "We dream of a new politics that will renew the world under their weary, suspicious gaze. There's always a new way, a better way that's not been tried before." 84 million people are registered to vote. It's the largest democratic event in African history. The elections were postponed at 2:40 a.m. on election day. Nigerian politics, like Ben Okri's preferred literary genre of magic realism, has spun some surreal narratives of its own. Who can forget the legendary pleasure seeker, General Sani Abacha, President Umaru Yar'Adua, who allegedly was kept alive or not for a number of days in an ambulance in the State House grounds. Even the austere President Buhari went missing for a few months. So clearly a lot hinges on this income. Abu Bakr has struck a Bill Clinton circa 1992 note, keeps chanting, "It's the economy, stupid, let's get Nigerians working again." So let's see how this turns out. Change is inevitable because that's the way of the world, but not just yet, as it were. Buhari said yesterday, "I've given the military and the police instructions to be ruthless. We are not going to be blamed for the bad conduct of the election." He said anyone trying to intimidate voters or interfere with the voting will do it at the expense of his own life. In this, let's move on to Zimbabwe. Biti is seen standing in the holding area at Rotten Row. Guard opens the gate while Nelson Chamisa waits for him. This was after he was sentenced for announcing incorrect results. Probably correct, frankly. Mnangagwa is quoted in the Standard in Zimbabwe, "We're now going after those doctors who treated victims of army brutality." In brackets, that's David Coulthard. 21st of January, and I've got no reason to step back from this, I said, what is clear to me is that Zimbabwe is at a tipping point moment. Mnangagwa, those lawyers that were inciting violence, we're now going after them. So those who choose violence, we are prepared. Going back to the 21st of January, quoting Kapuscinski, "The choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. If the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over." ISS Africa is writing headlined, "Slamming the Door on Democracy in the DRC." Martin Fayulu, leader of the Lamuka coalition and winner of the recent presidential election in the DR Congo, but who is not the new president, wrote to the Africa's leaders gathered for last week's African Union summit. He proposed two options: setting up a special AU commission to verify the truth of the ballot in the DRC, or holding new elections in 6 months. Fayulu's letter had no impact, and his proposed options did not come even close to being a subject of discussion at the summit. In his letter, Fayulu summed up nicely what all of this means for the future of the DRC and more broadly for democracy in Africa. If the AU does not take action, the Congolese will no longer believe in elections, and this will be a defeat for democracy that will have repercussions beyond the DRC. The article concludes, what options then do the citizens of African countries have when domestic institutions are captured by a small political elite? The recent responses from the AU, SADC and the international community would seem to indicate that they have very few. 18th of February, I said we've witnessed a Nollywood-level plot twist in the DR Congo, and it's clear the will of the people was not expressed in the result. 4th of February, in an extraordinary plot twist, President Kabila invested a losing candidate, Felix Tshisekedi, with the presidency, and the US hardly raised a murmur. 21st of January, I quoted Martin Fayulu, "I won't let the victory of the Congolese people be stolen. If they don't get the truth now, no one will have trust in any election ever again." 7th of Jan, I said this is a clear-cut case where the will of the people is being subverted. It's egregious, it's outrageous. The Economist is saying whether Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa succeeds depends firstly on elections on May the 8th. In local elections in 2016, the ANC slumped to 54% of the vote. Polls suggest that this time it will win around 60%. And then Ramaphosa's fans note his lifetime of outfoxing opponents. He's charming and ruthless. He has the patience of a vulture, says a friend. He is the most calculating person I know. And Ramaphosa says of himself, "I am an enigma." Returning to an article I'd written about the DRC result, I said, you know, the announced result is the equivalent of overturning Ramaphosa, who will surely win the election in 2019, and investing Mumusi Maimane as the president. Look at this, South Africa's DST-funded attempt at getting a rocket 15 kilometers up into the sky. North Korea, eat your heart out, you can't make it up. South African all shares up 4.78% so far this year. Dollar rand, as I said, from hero in January to zero in February, 14.14. Egyptian pound, probably one of the best performing currencies in the world, at 17.5365. Nigerian all shares up 2.42% this year. Ghana's stock exchange composite index is minus 2.77% this year. President Museveni opened a national address saying, "I am not Bosco." You'll have to read the article in quotes if you want to know what that's all about. But he was, of course, a guest of mine at Mindspeak. Have a look at that. This is Burundi's new presidential palace, built by China via Face-to-Face Africa and Eric Olanda. 4 years after the launch of construction, China has presented a $22 million presidential palace it built for Burundi as a gift. Tanzania is searching for missing millions, raises questions over $1 billion. There was an unexplained mismatch between the collected revenue, $10.88 billion, and $10.24 billion, which was released by the Treasury for government expenditure. What happened to the missing $640 million? African arguments. President Magufuli reportedly interrogated the man behind the report. "The CAG is here," he said. "Can you stand up and tell us if any money was stolen?" Assad responded, "No, sir, no money was stolen." In the end, they did an audit which debunks this figure, and in its place emerges a bigger one, $1.03 billion. Quartz, state-owned enterprises are particularly fitting given their lucrative nature and sphere. This is talking about the possible privatization of Ethio Telecom. This makes them enticing propositions for investors and therefore more likely to yield handsome bids. Ethio Telecom will be the first of 4 state-owned firms to be denationalized. It's the sole voice and data provider, caters to over 41 million customers. Abiy has said the government plans to sell a 30 to 40% stake to top-rated industry firms and will split the state-run company into 2 competing businesses to spur competition. I take you back to the 2nd of July last year when I was quoting Abiy around that time, who says we are in debt, we have to pay back, but we can't, and secondarily we aren't able to finish projects we have started. And with that he announced his economic pivot, of which this privatization is now a part. And I was saying then that the 90 or so days that he'd been in power, represented the most consequential arrival of an African politician on the African stage since Mandela walked out of prison blinking in the sunlight and constructed his rainbow nation. And then I was quoting, you know, his Abiy is moved at such speed, and I was quoting Virilio, who says, whoever controls the territory possesses it. Possession of territory is not primarily about laws and contracts, but first and foremost a matter of movement and circulation. The Central Bank of Kenya is inviting comments on the draft Central Bank of Kenya Mortgage Refinance Companies Regulations 2019. Have a look at that. My article at the end of January was about reasons for optimism. I spoke about the downshifting in the US interest rate curve, which had boosted frontier and sub-Saharan African sovereign debt prices, lowered yields. I was citing the Kenya 30-year, which was above 10%, now it's below 9%. You can see that in this Site on Invest research chart of the 2018 Eurobonds. Look at it, look at the spike and then the rally. In that same article, I was talking about the unfortunate events across the road at the Dusit, and I was quoting Don DeLillo's Mao 2. I used to think it was possible for an artist to alter the inner life of the culture. Now bomb makers and gunmen have taken that territory. With respect to the shilling, I was saying a move below 100 would catch a lot of people off guard. We're last at 100.2. Nairobi All Share has been in a corrective mode last two sessions, but it's still up 11.54% year to date. NSE 20 is up 7.53% year to date. If you want to dive into any single share at the Securities Exchange, then please just click on the final link. Thank you.